Imagine a moment when the world narrows to the point of perfect clarity and meaning. Imagine your phone fades into silence while your hands move with a rhythm older than thought. That tension between urgency and calm is not coincidence, but a signature of something deeper called flow. This feeling is intoxicating because it feels like reclaiming time from distraction and reclaiming yourself from the tyranny of trivial busyness. When people describe flow, they often use the language of magic, but there is a precise psychology and history behind that magic. Mihaly Mihaly spent a career asking a simple, urgent question about happiness and attention. He interviewed artists, athletes, scientists, and craftsmen to discover what consistent experiences of fulfillment actually looked like in practice. His answer was not a recipe, but a pattern. And he called that pattern flow. Csikszentmihalyi did not invent the feeling. He codified it, mapped its contours, and revealed how ordinary people stumble into extraordinary states by accident. His fieldwork turned anecdote into theory, showing how repeatable conditions produce sustained engagement across cultures and professions. Flow is characterized by an intense focus where awareness narrows without panic or dullness. In flow, there are clear goals, immediate feedback, and a delicate balance between perceived skill and challenge that keeps attention anchored. People in flow describe timelessness, a loss of self-consciousness, effortless control, and a deep sense of purpose. These characteristics might sound poetic, but they map a cognitive architecture where attention selects information that reduces uncertainty and amplifies action. The result is a state where performance and experience fuse into a single stream, and both feel luminous and right. One of the most important features of flow is autotelic experience, where the activity becomes its own reward and meaning. When work is autotelic, the boundary between doing and being dissolves, and motivation flows from within rather than from external validation. This internal reward system is why artists return to the easel and coders lose hours in problem solving without immediate praise. Autotelic personalities are not born perfect, but shaped through repeated encounters with intrinsically rewarding tasks and environments that reinforce curiosity. These personalities tend to seek out challenges that match their skills and to create feedback loops that prolong engagement. Flow lives in a narrow channel between boredom and anxiety, created by the relationship between challenge and skill. When challenge exceeds perceived skill, people feel anxious and fragmented. But when skill exceeds challenge, people feel bored and listless. Flow emerges only when both challenge and skill are high and precisely matched, creating a sweet spot where growth happens. This dynamic is visualized as a flow channel in many textbooks, but its human implication is practical. Craft your tasks to be slightly beyond current skill, and you will prompt engagement and development. You will also encounter the paradox that stagnation seems comfortable, while flow demands courage to continue stepping up. Examples of flow are everywhere if we learn to recognize them in ordinary life, and not only in extraordinary feats. A concert musician in mid-solo, a surgeon executing a complex procedure, a climber moving through a difficult pitch, or a writer assembling meaning with fevered clarity all share the same subjective architecture. Those instances are instructive because they reveal that flow is an outcome of conditions rather than of innate talent alone. Studying varied examples teaches a practical lesson. Different domains require different inputs. But the cognitive signature of flow remains similar and can be cultivated deliberately. That portability makes flow a technology of experience rather than a mysterious gift reserved for the few. Neuroscience has started to map what happens in the brain during flow, revealing surprising and elegant mechanisms. One prominent theory involves transient hypofrontality, where parts of the prefrontal cortex quiet down, reducing overthinking and self-monitoring, which allows for smoother automaticity and creative improvisation. Neurotransmitter systems including dopamine and norepinephrine appear to tune attention and reward, creating a neurochemical landscape that feels like clarity and joy. These findings are not complete prescriptions, but they offer a biological plausibility to experiences that earlier generations described only mystically. Knowing the neural tendencies helps us design practices that align with our brains rather than fight them, increasing the likelihood of favorable experience. Flow is intimately related to happiness in surprisingly specific ways because it ties positive emotion to clear progress and agency. Studies indicate that flow experiences correlate with higher life satisfaction and lower anxiety because they build skills and provide meaningful evidence of growth. Unlike transient pleasures, flow weaves competence and autonomy into everyday life, producing durable hedonic and eudaimonic benefits. This relationship helps explain why some people report richer lives despite material scarcity, and why others feel empty amid abundance. The quality of experience matters more than volume of stimuli. Flow implants moments of meaning that accumulate into a life that can be remembered with pride rather than regret. Philosophers have long wrestled with the difference between pleasure and a life well lived, even before modern psychology named flow. Aristotle described eudaimonia as flourishing through activity that fulfills human capacities, which resembles the autotelic core of flow experiences. Stoics emphasized presence and skillful action in the face of fate, which maps onto the discipline and acceptance often found inside flow states. Connecting flow to philosophical traditions enriches its meaning, because it reframes flow not just as a psychological state, but as a practice in the good life. These philosophical conversations help us evaluate whether we seek flow for hedonistic escape or for responsible flourishing and contribution. Existentialist thinkers provide another lens for understanding flow by insisting that meaning arises through committed projects rather than passive absorption. For thinkers like Sartre and Camus, engagement in purposeful action is the remedy to existential vertigo, and those intentional acts can produce flow when structured well. Flow and existential authenticity both point toward a life shaped by choice, risk, and ongoing creation of self. This lens complicates the idea that flow is mere pleasure, because existential engagement demands responsibility for the ends you pursue. Flow can be a vehicle for existential meaning if the ends align with genuine values rather than shallow comfort or avoidance. Mindfulness and presence are cousins of flow, but they are not identical twins and have complementary roles in cultivating optimal experience. Mindfulness trains attention to remain anchored in the present through non-judgmental awareness, which reduces rumination and enhances the clarity needed for flow to ignite. In many ways, mindfulness clears the mental stage so flow can appear without the friction of scattered thought. Practices rooted in mindfulness can therefore be considered preparatory scaffolding for flow, smoothing cognitive barriers and increasing capacity for sustained focus. The distinction matters because one can be mindful without necessarily entering flow, and one can enter flow without formal meditation practice, though the combination is often powerful. There are concrete mindfulness practices that reliably improve attention and emotional regulation and thus prime flow experiences. Breath-focused meditation helps stabilize the nervous system and reduce the frantic oscillation between thought and sensation that undermines sustained engagement. Body scanning and focused movement practices cultivate embodied attention and sensitivity to feedback, which are crucial for tasks that require precise skill challenge calibration. These practices are not magical shortcuts, but consistent investments that change how the brain allocates resources across time. The habit of returning attention to a chosen anchor trains the cognitive muscles that will later support longer periods of intense creative work. Designing tasks for flow is a practical skill that blends intentionality with environmental control and adaptive challenge. First, clarify goals in a way that transforms vague aims into actionable steps that can produce immediate feedback and small victories. Second, increase difficulty incrementally while supporting skill development through resources, coaching, and deliberate practice techniques that create upward spirals of competence. Third, reduce friction by managing interruptions, controlling sensory input, and creating physical environments conducive to uninterrupted attention. These design principles convert nebulous workloads into scaffolding for repeated optimal experiences and sustainable mastery. Rituals and habits act like launch sequences that prime attention and frame meaning before work begins, and they are surprisingly effective at cueing flow. Simple rituals such as a short breathing exercise, a sequence of warm-up problems, or a chosen playlist signal to the brain that it is time for deep engagement. Over time, these rituals acquire associative power and reduce the energy cost of entry into high-focus states. Habits also protect the conditions needed to sustain flow by automating preparation and minimizing friction, which prevents the need for willpower alone to create optimal work periods. They are not glamorous, but they shape the architecture of attention in profound ways. Cal Newport's deep work concept overlaps heavily with flow and provides a modern organizational framework to protect high-value thinking from distraction. Deep work prescribes long, uninterrupted blocks of focused activity, paired with strict limits on shallow work and reactive communication. When combined with flow, friendly design, it becomes a practical lifestyle approach that prioritizes skill growth and meaningful output over perpetual stimulation. The implication is structural. Modern workplaces and educational systems must recalibrate incentives to reward concentrated value creation rather than constant busyness and fragmentation. Otherwise, our economies will continue to optimize for speed and attention capture rather than for depth and human flourishing. Flow at work requires more than individual discipline. It requires organizational structures that enable autonomy, feedback, and meaningful challenge. Companies that cultivate flow at scale do not simply mandate long hours, but redesign roles around learning, clear objectives, and immediate feedback loops. In such cultures, employees report not only increased productivity, but enhanced job satisfaction and lower burnout rates. This organizational perspective reframes management as an art of curating experiences rather than merely allocating tasks, and it raises an ethical obligation to design workplaces that support human attention and development. The raw ROI in creativity and retention is a practical argument that aligns business incentives with human needs. Flow is not reserved for rare accomplishments. It can be found in the humblest of daily activities when attention and intention align. Washing dishes, gardening, practicing scales, or having a focused conversation can all become portals to flow when tasks are approached with clarity and presence. Framing routine activities as opportunities for skillful engagement transforms domestic life into a training ground for flourishing. This democratization of flow is hopeful because it implies that meaningful living is accessible even without extraordinary resources or titles. The challenge is cultural and personal. Will we revalue presence in ordinary tasks or continue outsourcing meaning to rare, extraordinary events? Technology is a double-edged sword in the pursuit of flow because it can either support deep engagement or constantly fragment attention. Smartphones and endless feeds exploit reward systems with variable reinforcement schedules, making it harder to sustain long, unbroken stretches of concentration. At the same time, designed tools can aggregate feedback, automate low-value tasks, and present information in ways that amplify flow instead of undermining it. The choice is design-driven rather than inevitable. We can build interfaces and social norms that promote sustained engagement. Or we can allow commercial attention economies to erode our capacity for deep experience. Policy, interface design, and personal habits all play pivotal roles in determining this trajectory. Social flow occurs when groups synchronize attention and merge skills into collective performance, producing what some call group flow or team resonance. In ensemble music, sports teams, and agile project groups, members report a shared dissolution of egocentric concern and a unified sense of timing and purpose. Group flow demands trust, shared goals, and communication patterns that allow for rapid feedback and adaptive coordination. This phenomenon suggests that flow is not merely an individual achievement, but a social technology that can be cultivated for collective gains. It also raises ethical questions about how group flow is used and whether it is oriented toward constructive or destructive ends. Creativity and flow have a mutually reinforcing relationship, where divergent idea generation is supported by deep immersion and vice versa. Flow facilitates associative thinking by quieting inhibitive self-censorship and allowing tacit knowledge to surface, producing isomorphic leaps that feel effortless only in hindsight. Conversely, creative exploration often provides the right balance of challenge and novelty that keeps engagement sustained and productive. Understanding this reciprocity helps demystify the creative process and offers routes to repeat peak performance by intentionally structuring work cycles of exploration, incubation, and intense focused execution. Creativity, therefore, benefits from both unstructured play and the rigor of disciplined craft. A profound aspect of flow is its capacity for self-transcendence, where the boundaries of ego soften and actions feel guided by something larger than the individual. Many practitioners describe moments in flow that resemble mystical experiences, where personal concerns fade and a unified field of purpose emerges. These experiences can be transformative, altering value hierarchies and prompting sustained life changes toward greater generosity and meaning. This capacity for transcendence does not require religious belief, but it raises important philosophical questions about identity and agency. If optimal experience can dissolve egoic boundaries temporarily, then perhaps flourishing involves learning to orient identity toward larger projects without losing personal integrity. The ethical implications of promoting flow are complex, because not all flows are morally equivalent, and some can be harmful. Flow can serve destructive ends when used to optimize harmful tasks or to engineer compliance in manipulative ways. Conversely, flow oriented toward creativity, care, and learning supports flourishing and social goods. But discerning the difference requires philosophical reflection and institutional checks. This ethical dimension means that the cultivation of flow is not only a personal project, but a civic one involving choices about what societies value and reward. The good life cannot be reduced to optimal experience alone. It must be embedded within a moral framework that guides ends as well as means. There are common obstacles and misconceptions about flow that derail sincere attempts to cultivate it, and recognizing them helps us navigate practical pitfalls. First, chasing flow as an escape from life transforms a virtuous practice into addictive avoidance, because the goal becomes intensity rather than growth and contribution. Second, assuming flow is only for elite performers discourages novices, even though flow is accessible through structured practice. Addressing these misconceptions involves reframing flow as a tool for development and aligning its pursuit with ethical and long-term goals. It also requires patience, because flow is often the product of incremental improvements rather than sudden dramatic breakthroughs. Here is a practical 7-step guide you can use to increase your chances of entering flow regularly in meaningful activities. Step 1. Clarify a specific, achievable goal that provides immediate feedback and a clear endpoint. Step 2. Choose tasks that slightly exceed current skills and commit to deliberate practice to bridge the gap. Step 3. Minimize interruptions and create an environment conducive to sustained attention. Step 4. Use short rituals to cue focus and to reduce entry costs. Step 5. Harvest small wins and calibrate difficulty upwards. Step 6. Integrate mindfulness or breathing practice to stabilize attention. Step 7. Reflect on value alignment to ensure that your flow serves ends you genuinely endorse. Stories give these practices flesh, so consider 3 brief vignettes of people who transformed their relationships to work and meaning. The first is an artist who converted daily sketches into rigorous studies and found flow through disciplined incremental challenge, evolving amateur joy into professional mastery. The second is a software engineer who replaced reactive email habits with deep work blocks and achieved sustained flow that dramatically improved both productivity and job satisfaction. The third is a mother who reframed routine childcare tasks as micro-practices of presence and skill, discovering unexpected depth in ordinary attentions. These stories underscore the universal adaptability of flow and its power to reshape how life is experienced at every scale. Flow has modern relevance beyond personal well-being because it offers a blueprint for redesigning education, workplaces, and public institutions toward deeper learning and engagement. Educational systems that prioritize mastery, feedback, and purposeful projects can cultivate flow that equips students not only with skills but with sustained motivation for lifelong learning. Similarly, workplaces that reward depth over busyness generate innovation and resilience rather than constant crisis management. These systemic shifts require cultural change, policy incentives, and leadership that values long-term development over short-term metrics. The potential payoff is large. Societies capable of nurturing flow will likely be more creative, healthier, and more meaningfully engaged. To summarize, flow is a precise cluster of psychological conditions that produces deep engagement, heightened performance, and durable satisfaction when aligned with meaningful ends. It is both an inner technology of attention and an outward social technology that can be designed into institutions and habits to improve human flourishing. Recognizing flow's philosophical dimensions helps us choose how we want to shape our lives and societies with intentionality rather than default tendencies. The deepest twist is that flow points toward a paradox. By trying less to chase happiness directly and more to commit to worthy challenges, we often discover that happiness arrives as a byproduct of craft and presence. This realignment from pursuit to practice is less flashy, but more enduring. And it asks of us one final question: what worth pursuing will you let consume your attention? If this exploration gave you new perspective, then consider it an invitation to experiment with attention and to design little laboratories of practice in your own life. Start small, cultivate rituals, and be curious about which environments and challenges reliably produce sustained engagement for you. Remember that flow is a skill refined by repetition and guided by values rather than a one-time trophy to be captured and displayed. If this gave you new perspective, hit subscribe and join the conversation in the comments about where you find your flow. The journey toward optimal experience is communal, iterative, and quietly revolutionary. And your moments of attention are the currency of the life you are building.